Ladies and gentlemen, it's 2 minutes past 3 o'clock p.m. and this is Invest.RUHR, Telemedicine Impulses from Israel. Welcome to all people attending this meeting, this event, and even a very, very warm welcome to all people contributing to this event. We were invited to this event by the BMR, Business Metropole Ruhr. And the Business Metropole Ruhr is going to develop business activities in the Ruhr area, and it goes for doing this with the help of collaboration to partners from foreign countries. And they are doing it in the area of health innovation activities. And as probably all of you know, digitization and telemedicine, digitization in general and telemedicine in particular, are key resources for better health in the future. And this is the background why this event was organized. I want to start this event as a moderator. My name is Joseph Hilbert. I am teaching health economics at the Ruhr University in Bochum, and I am head of the network of German health regions. And probably this is the background why I was invited by the BMR people to collaborate with them in preparation of this workshop. But Markus Schlüter, the boss, the CEO of BMR, knows better about the background, the reasons, the motivations why this event was organized, and therefore I welcome him for a welcome to this conference. Markus, it's your turn.
Thanks, Joseph. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Business Metropole Ruhr, I'm very glad to welcome you to our digital event. Business Metropole Ruhr is the economic development agency of the Ruhr metropolis. We develop and market the region. We bring together innovative startups from target markets with actors from the whole Ruhr area. Against the background of the COVID-19 pandemic, the expansion of international cooperation is becoming even more important. With events like this, we want to broaden and to deepen the international exchange of knowledge, and we want to create new opportunities for innovation in the lead markets of the Ruhr metropolis. With about 350,000 employees, the health sector is one of the largest lead markets here in the Ruhr area. There are approximately 110 hospitals, 9,500 resident doctors, and a broad corporate landscape of 6,500 players. And in this case, MAS also stands for class. The portfolio ranges from biomedicine, medical technology, healthcare IT, and healthcare logistics. The Ruhr metropolis is an attractive and highly productive trade and service location with an annual turnover of over 20 billion euros. BMR started extensive activities with Israel about over 3 years ago and established the Innovation Bridge to Israel. We organized successful delegation journeys to Israel. We introduced over 300 startups to the Ruhr area with our scouting activities. And in spite of COVID-19, we keep building the bridge to Israel with digital events to keep the knowledge transfer going on. Israel is not only one of our target markets. It's one of the countries with extensive experience in the development, in testing, and in the use of telemedicine. We are looking forward to hear from Israeli startups about their solutions and experiences. The goal of today's event is to bring together players from Israel and the Ruhr metropolis so that they can learn from each other and explore more cooperation. This journey is only possible with our partners. I would like to thank MedEcon Ruhr, Gesundheitscampus Bochum, Institut Arbeit und Technik, Geriatrieverbund Dortmund, Ruhrgebietskonferenz Pflege, and North Rhine-Westphalia Global Business for their collaboration. Thank you for joining us today. I hope to see you soon in Israel or in the Ruhr area, and I give the spotlight back to you, Mr. Hilbert.
Thanks, Markus Schlüter. So now you are aware of the background for this conference, and now you know why it is a great honor, big honor for me to moderate this workshop. And it was a big honor to work with the BMR people in preparing this conference. But it was even more. It was pleasure, it was fun. And that is thanks to Daniela Oliel and Dimitri Domansky. Those two people were responsible for doing this job at the BMR, and it was really nice to be part of their professionalism and ambition, and of their good mood in preparing this. So thank you very much at the beginning of this meeting. Now let me address Grisha Alroy-Alosa. Grisha is sitting in Tel Aviv and waiting for us. And Grisha is, yes, I had a view on YouTube on him and on some of his contribution, and I learned he is responsible for the German-Israel Chamber of Commerce and Industry. That's his job. But he has more than a job. He has some ambitions. And his ambitions are bridging people, bridging ideologies, bridging institution, and bridging creativity approaches. Insofar, I am very, very happy to have him on board, and I'm very excited to hear his input on a briefing of the telemedicine landscape in Israel. Grisha, you are welcome.
Well, thank you very much for this wonderful introduction. I also want to say thank you to Business Metropole Ruhr, especially to Daniela, to Dimitri, and also, of course, to the people here on my team at the Chamber, the German-Israeli Chamber of Industry and Commerce, especially Sharon Mazuri. It's great that, although it is so difficult or nearly impossible to travel nowadays, to digitally at least, to virtually at least, meet each other, look each other in the eyes and talk together. Now, as the CEO of the German-Israeli Chamber of Industry and Commerce, I will not talk so much about the basics of telemedicine, because you have much better people on the panel and in the participants of doing so. I was also asked in a very, very short time, very briefly, to talk about Israel, to give a general briefing about why Israel, what it is, and I will, without further ado, share my screen. Israel is an old people in a young country, and with a history of 5,781 years, it is nearly impossible to talk about it only for about 10 minutes, but I will, first of all, talk fast, and I will, of course, skip many additional aspects. So let me just dive right into it. We're talking about a small country. Israel has the size of Rheinland-Pfalz, population of 9.3 million, something like Austria. GDP per capita is in the upper third of European comparison numbers, about $42,000. The yellow numbers are the numbers of 2019. The red numbers are the numbers of 2020. And you see how debt and how deficit and how growth developed negatively, like in all other countries worldwide, because of the Corona pandemic. The unemployment rate, same thing. Very, very clear, deep cuts into the economic performance of the country and of the people. And the most important number on this page is the population growth of 1.8% annually. So we are actually a very young population, much younger than European populations like Germany or Italy or Austria. And this is why many performances, also during the COVID-19 pandemic, were slightly different from what you experience in Europe. also true after having shown the red numbers of 2020 is the fact that Israel is number one in venture capital per capita worldwide, number two in startups per capita worldwide, number two in the global innovation ranking and the number of NASDAQ listed companies from Israel. The amount of startups, over 8,000 multinationals, 380. The number of unicorns increased by 17 in the last 24 months, quite unbelievable, and $75 billion and 711 exits in the last 5 years show that the high-tech scene, and when we talk about telemedicine, we talk about biotech developments, and not only in the recent year, but also in the years before, are a very important part of those exits and also of the NASDAQ listed companies. Actually, over 54% of NASDAQ listed companies from Israel are dealing in the medical domain, be it in the field of diagnostics or even in the field of treatment. Now, the question is, why did that develop? And in German, I explain it with the 6 Ks. Now, the Germans will understand those Ks, and the Israelis will understand my meaning. The first K is the K of Kleinheit, smallness. Small in area, small in population, living actually on a geopolitical island. This smallness means that the market for Israeli companies, also for Israeli tech companies, is not in the country and not in the region, but it is globally over the Mediterranean into Europe, over the Atlantic to North America, South America, and of course to Southeast Asia. This is the first reason why Israeli high-tech companies are globally equipped. The second K is the K of Knappheit, scarcity, as I would say in English. It's a country with not enough water, and this is why there is a natural scarcity in food production, scarce in oil, no oil, recently gas offshore. But because there is a scarcity of water and therefore scarcity in food, new technologies from the outset had to be developed in order to feed this ever-growing population. And the third K is the K of Krieg, war, conflict. Actually, this country lives in war for 5 generations. This is why, because of the smallness, because of the scarcity, it had to develop own military and defense technologies, and the Israeli military became actually the foundry of new technologies in Israel, and later on those technologies converted into civic technologies, very often in the medical field. We see that at the NASDAQ listed companies. So the military is a very important part in the high-tech development of the country. The fourth K is the K of Köpfe, brains, heads. It is education, but it is also the influx of highly educated immigrants from over 100 countries worldwide coming to Israel, a very high degree of technicians, academics, and engineers in the workforce, and the highest amount of the GDP expenditure for research and development by 4.3%. And the fifth K is the K of culture, Kultur. Because of the smallness and because of the scarcity and because of the war and because of the immigration from so many parts of the world, this is a multicultural society. People from over 100 countries, speaking over 60 languages, reading over 20 different foreign newspapers every day. This culture developed into a culture that likes to take risks. This is geopolitical risks, but it is also entrepreneurial risks. There's a readiness to fail as long as you get up on your feet again. It's a country of very flat hierarchies. It's a country where we turn to each other only by padu. There's no Z in Hebrew. The people have ambitions. They are direct. They say mission impossible does not exist. You have to think out of the box. You need a certain amount of chutzpah. In Germany, you would say Kratzbürstigkeit or any other word. You use the word in German as well. So this is a culture that is ready to take risks, that is ready to fail, ready to try again and again until you do it. There is no problem that you cannot solve. This is a basic teaching from kindergarten throughout school, the youth movements, and then especially in the military, and especially in the military in those elite units like, for example, Unit A200. And the last K is the K of capital, capital, something that was very soon understood that without venture capital, you cannot bridge the valley of death of innovation. And this is why the state actually developed the first 10 VC funds in Israel. And this is how the Israeli VC scene could develop into a very interesting and successful one. We saw the numbers before, and foreign direct investment because of that are two-digit billion US dollar numbers each and every year. So if you take those 6 Ks together, this gives a certain understanding why so many disruptive technologies made in Israel evolved. And I just put up some 12 of them, but I could easily fill up a page with 100 of those. And many of them are in the fields where Israelis are best. They are best in the digitization of reality. They are best in data management, data gathering, and data interpretation. They are very good in artificial intelligence and machine vision and machine learning. And you, of course, understand that most of those fields are extremely relevant to telemedicine and to mobile medicine and to modern medicine as such. Now, let me just, in a very few slides, go over some more topics that I think are important when you talk about Israel nowadays. Israel and COVID-19, these are the actual numbers. I just took them off the newspaper of today. The death and affected total and heavily sick. Most important is the number of vaccinated. Israel is leading the world list in the number of vaccinated citizens. And yet the numbers of just yesterday infected is nearly 4,400. If you multiply that by 9 in order to compare it to Germany, it is 6 times as high as in Germany. So we are actually in a crazy run between vaccination and growing danger of variants and mutations. This is a situation that no one knows how to deal with, and actually also we in Israel do not. I could not, at least in a few sentences, mention the geopolitical developments recently. The peace or the Abraham Accords with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, later on with Sudan, then Morocco, and others might be coming. I don't want to go too much into detail in here, but there are economic interests, very strongly so. There are political interests because countries like the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, but also Saudi Arabia and others, are seeing in Israel more and more an ally in the regional war that is going on between the non-Arab Islamic states like Iran and Turkey on one side, and the old Sunni Arab world like Saudi Arabian Peninsula and Egypt and North Africa. This is why this happened. And for Israelis, this is a totally new experience because we have peace with Egypt and with Jordan for 40, respectively 25 years already. But a really welcome was only experienced for Israelis when they came to Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Just to mention, German-Israeli economic relations has to be mentioned at least in 3 or 4 bullet points. They started very, very low. 1960, a trade volume of $100 million US. 2019, we reached 9 billion. And Germany, therefore, is Israel's 4th largest trading partner worldwide. And Israel, and this is even more interesting for most of you, I guess, Israel is Germany's 3rd largest trading partner in the MENA region. So that is to say, in the whole Middle East, North Africa region after the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. So this is a very strong traditional economic relationship between two countries that have a common past, have a very good present, and have a very promising future. And I mentioned a couple of borders, and I like this sentence so much, so I translated it for you. You know, they say in America everything is allowed unless it's forbidden, while in Europe everything is forbidden unless it's allowed. And in Israel, it seems very often that everything is allowed even if it is forbidden. So if you deal with Israelis, take that into consideration. We have a thing with frontiers. It is one of the most common, popular hobbies of the Israelis to try and cross borders, your personal borders, your career borders, but also many others. So I am in Tel Aviv. This is a photo I took from my office of Jaffa at sunset. So, you know, it's beautiful. Come and visit us. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Grisha. Many of us will follow your invitation. That's point one. Point two is, I'm sure I personally will come back to you first with respect to deeper talk and exchange on Israel and the economic prospects and development. And secondly, I will come back to ask you for one of these cups. This Schutzbar cups. It was so nice. So
okay,
it's worth to.
I will take you up on that
in Tel Aviv only because of this cup. Thanks a lot. Unfortunately, I have to stop you now and address the further people contributing to this workshop, and I will try to introduce them. I will start with the guests. It's first Professor Dr. Eyal Zimlichman. By the way, his first presentation as a professor. Congratulations again. So welcome to Eyal Zimlichman. He is deputy head of one of the world famous hospitals, the Sheba Medical Center in Tel Aviv and close to Tel Aviv. And he is in charge of the innovation activities at this world famous hospital. And he does it with the help of something that he and others call a health innovation ecosystem, as a kind of encompassing, integrating approach of different strands. And we will be happy to hear from that, how it works. And we will be very happy to learn how it works with respect to the fight against COVID-19. Welcome, Eyal. Then Dan Schwarzmann. He is head of Mind Up. Mind Up is something we are familiar with. It's an incubator. It's an incubator for startups. And this startup activities he is promoting, organizing, supporting, has a big pillar with respect to telemedicine. So we will learn a lot about recent innovation activities and about the prospects for the future. Welcome again, Dan. Hope I described your activities in an adequate manner. Your academic background is, as I learned, economist and with specialization on strategy development. So we will profit from your knowledges. Then I'm addressing the people from Germany. First of all, welcome to Professor Dr. Jörg Debatin from Berlin and from the Ruhr area, from Mülheim. I don't know where you are sitting now. Nevertheless, a very warm welcome. And Professor Debatin is by training, he is physician, and he has specialization on radiology, and he is one of the leading experts in teleradiology. However, it's not only this physician activity, he was also a very successful hospital manager and innovation manager, and he is now in charge of the Health Innovation Hub in Berlin, which is very close to the government in Berlin, very close to the Ministry of Health. And his job is to push the Germans and the German health sector for, let me say, encouraged innovation. Last but not least, Dr. Christophe Schubert. He is probably the youngest among us, but he is young by age, but not young by experience. He is a medical doctor as well, internal medicine, and what is very relevant, he is familiar with cardiological issues and sleep medicine. Sleeping well is very good in these times of pandemia, and insofar we have very relevant professional backgrounds in his person. And he is living and working in Essen, University Hospital in Essen, and he is in charge of the Center of Sleep Medicine and Telemedicine, and he is one of the pioneers in telemedicine. He even worked together a decade of years ago with Friedrich Köhler in Berlin at the Charité on telecardiology. So I introduced the panel for today. I hope I didn't forget someone. And we will start with Jörg Debatin, who will outline the situation of digitization and telemedicine in German health business. Jörg, it's your turn.
Well, thanks very much, Joseph, and hello to everyone, particularly hello to Grisha. I hope you remember my visit to Tel Aviv and your wonderful country. I must say the 6Ks sort of resonated when you mentioned it, and a lot of fond memories were awakened when indeed I was part of a delegation that visited Israel and the high-tech medical sort of scene before Corona. It seems like it's a really long time ago, but it's wonderful to see you again. And I can certainly sort of echo a lot of things that Grisha sort of said. It's a very, very welcoming community. So for those of you who have not visited, it's certainly worthwhile. And I, in reflecting on that visit, I think it gave us really a big push towards what we have done in the meantime in trying to emulate and try to copy some of the sort of innovation spirit that is so alive and palpable in Israel, and to introduce some of that into our German culture, into our German environment. And of course, the question is always: is the glass half full or is it half empty? I'll just pretend that it is half full at this point, and just to put things into context, when the current Minister of Health took office 3.5 years ago, there was sort of a ranking with regard to the degree of digitization of healthcare systems performed by the Bertelsmann Foundation. And they looked at 17 countries. And the good news was that they also included Poland, because they were last, but we were second last. So, there wasn't much space between us and Poland either. So there was a lot of room for improvement, as my math teacher would have said. And he really went to work. And as part of that work, he implemented a new department for innovation and digitization, led by Gottfried Ludewig, and who assembled a great team. And Grisha, you may remember, Gottfried was actually our delegation leader when we came to Israel to have a look around. And with him, we also came to life, and the Health Innovation Hub was founded. Since then, the government, or rather the Ministry of Health, has been rather busy. They've introduced no less than 28 legislative initiatives with digital medical content. There are, in fact, 4, or rather 6 major legislative pieces of work, 5 of which have passed Parliament. One of them is the last sort of law is still in the parliamentary process and being discussed right now. So a lot of things have really changed, and just to sort of mention some of the highlights. To me, really the basis of all digital technologies and of all digital efforts is something that you have seen, that we have seen in Israel, and that now comes in very handy in your vaccination campaign, of which we are all very envious, by the way, to see how efficient you are going about this, and that is the electronic patient record system. In contrast to Israel, where you have the electronic patient record system being part of each of your healthcare providers, and you sort of have 3.5 of them, so you have sort of 3.5 different systems. In Germany, we worked hard to have a common system that is being rolled out now. In fact, it has become available as of January 1. All the statutory German health insurance companies were mandated to provide a cloud-based repository for medical data in the form of a patient record system to their insured sort of customers. And now, as of July 1 of this year, the physicians will be able to implement this and actually create these electronic record systems for their patients. So that is going to be sort of the basis of where digital medicine will build on in the future. In parallel to that, we are introducing on July 1 of this year the digital prescription. So all medications will be prescribed digitally in a sort of big sort of a trial out effort, a soft launch starting in July 1, and then becoming mandatory on January 1 of 2022. So next year that we will have that system sort of mandatory. Why do we need sort of more of a trial and error period? Because we actually in Germany have 590 million prescriptions per year. So we try not to mess up with that process. It's a very frequently used process, as these numbers underscore. With that digital prescription, which will be QR code based, we will then create an electronic medication record system that will be part of the electronic patient record system, of course. But for the first time, there will be a digital overview of the medications that an individual patient actually consumes, which of course is a major step when you think about medication and therapy safety issues, where I think that will have tremendous impact. And then of course there are many convenience aspects that are also associated with that. The one thing that we're probably proudest of is that we introduced DiGAS, and DiGAS is and most of you are quite well versed in German. There are digitale Gesundheitsanwendungen, or apps that can be prescribed. And Germany in October of last year emerged as the first country worldwide, at least known to me, that implemented a pathway to have apps being prescribed by general practitioners, by physicians at large, sort of as part of the normal healthcare system, fully reimbursed. And in addition to that, we also introduced what we call a fast track sort of pathway, so that the creators of these apps are actually don't have to wait 3 years to get into the remuneration process, but rather only 3 months and get an answer quickly. And then there is the option of a trial period of 1 to 2 years, during which the app creators, the innovators, can create or can assemble the evidence that they need to be finally listed and to become sort of a continuous, a stable part of the healthcare environment. That has actually caused a lot of ripples and a lot of positive effects. And I can proudly report that we have a lot of innovators also from Israel who are actually quite interested in trying out their products in our markets, because we have basically found now a way to unlock a market, a very homogeneous market of 73 million insured, that all are remunerated by the same rules in the same system, and open up this market to innovators to allow them to answer the very crucial question that every innovator with a new product has: is my product going to fly? Is it going to be accepted by patients and physicians alike? And that's something that I think we are indeed proud of. And Grisha, to your benefit, That's something that we worked on hard already while we visited Israel, but our visit certainly supported our conviction that we really wanted to get this done. Let me sort of round my introductory remarks off by one more topic that may be important or maybe interesting to also our Israeli partners, and that is the hospital digitization strategy. During Corona, we quickly recognized, and the government quickly recognized, that actually our hospitals are quite well positioned, but the only reason why they are well positioned is because they know how to improvise, or rather the physicians and nursing staff knew how to improvise, and it became evident that we needed more systemic support from a digital basis. And this is why the government, in a record-taking time, has allotted 4.3 billion euros to the digitization of the German hospital system. It is legislation that passed very, very quickly. It is based on a couple of ground rules that are interesting from a legislative process. The first is that you now get money, but if you don't digitize by 2025, then you will actually get less money for the services that you provide. So there is incentive, but there's also penalty. The other aspect that is really important is that as part of that legislative process, we were able to implement international standards. So something that Germany has had a hard time with when it comes to digital medicine, the adherence to international standards has now become legislative law and legislative basis. So SNOMED CT, LOINC, HL7, FIRE, all the standards that you are quite aware and you're quite familiar with in Israel will also work in Germany. So we wanted to make it easy for our international partners to actually see the German market and make our healthcare better with your products where you can support. We have identified 10 digital areas, or 10 areas where digital instruments can help. They are spelled out in detail with very clear criteria which need to be fulfilled, and some criteria that are more optional. Just to put things into relation, from a number point of view, the yearly market size for digital medicine in the German hospital space amounts to 1.3 billion euros. We are now adding 4.3 billion to that in a 24-month period. So you can imagine that there is a lot of activity right now, and it all needs to go relatively fast. The money needs to be allotted and sort of assigned by December 31 of this year. So this is a process where we would strongly recommend anybody who wants to be in that market and be part of that sort of almost avalanche of digital sort of innovation should come and look at Germany right now, because there really is a tremendous opportunity. So let me close by saying that obviously there's still a lot of other projects that we're all working on. We found that our public health sector needs also a revamp with regard to their digital technologies, but I won't really bore you with all of that. Let me just sort of conclude by saying again, thank you, Grisha, for inspiring all of us during our visit. It really was a true inspiration. It sort of helped us to move on and to make some progress. At the same time now, I think we are ready, and we are open for business, for innovators from all throughout the world, and particularly, of course, from our friends in Israel, to open our market and really bring your innovative products to use. And sort of, and this therein really lies a huge advantage. It's the German statutory health insurance market is the largest homogeneous healthcare market in the Western world. So if you are in that market, 73 million potential users will evaluate your products. So thank you very much, Joseph, for having me, and happy to discuss.
Thanks again, Jörg. And what I understood is a very strong welcome to expertise, to investment money, to broad products and services from other countries, particularly from Israel. And therefore, my question directly to Eyal, you have this sophisticated health innovation ecosystem at your hospital. Can you tell us what that means, how you are doing innovative activities, and can you step into this invitation to collaborate with Germany? Eyal, you are welcome.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you for inviting me to speak in this panel. Maybe best if I can share a couple of slides to tell you more about what we're doing and specifically about telemedicine. First of all, just to say, Sheba Medical Center, I think you mentioned this, is the largest medical center in Israel, 2,000-bed hospital, very central, very strong footprint in Israel, treating about 1.6 million patients every year, and also ranked by Newsweek as number 9 in the world on the top hospitals just last year. We're waiting for the new ranking to come in about 2 weeks. And we talk a lot about transformation that healthcare is going to go through. In the next decade, healthcare is going to be completely redesigned. And that redesign will require a lot of technology, and technology will be mostly digital. We talk a lot about the digital transformation of healthcare, and we're pretty sure it's going to happen because, you know, many other sectors have gone through that transformation. If we look at banking, if we look at telecommunication, they've been completely transformed in the past 20 years. And healthcare is just very slow to go through this transformation. So there's going to be need for a huge amount of innovation, whether it's in the telehealth space, which I think is going to be the main disruptor of healthcare in the next decade, or artificial intelligence that will allow us to make much better decisions, become more effective, more efficient, much more patient-centered. Virtual reality and augmented reality, we do a lot of work around that. I won't focus on it. And robotics, of course, whether it's in the surgical theater or outside of the surgical theater, will play a critical role, especially as we link robotics together with artificial intelligence, which will happen also in the next 10 years. And this is how we came up to structure our new innovation program called ARC, standing for Accelerate, Redesign, and Collaborate, accelerating innovation to redesign healthcare by collaborating with partners. And it's about this ecosystem that will change the future of medicine. And we even set a goal for ourselves to change healthcare by the year 2030. And the clock is ticking, so we have a lot of work to do, as you can imagine. And the word ecosystem is at the heart of this, because no one hospital, regardless of how big you are, will be able to do this by itself. We have to build partnerships. We have to build a network. We have to build an ecosystem. And at the heart of ARC are 4 fundamental principles that govern the strategy on how to go about this huge transformation we're about to see. The first one is the focus on digital health, because that's what's going to have the most impact in the next 10 years, much more than pharma or medical device, which we've been very much focused on before. The second is open innovation, working together with the industry. It's not us against them, but working together, whether these are startup companies or industry partners. We bring them into ARC, we turn them into ARC members, and we work very closely together with the industry. We've turned Sheba into a startup-friendly environment, which of course is a long story of how we're doing that, but really has really transformed how we work with startup companies. The third principle is international collaborations, looking across the globe to find the most appropriate partners, regardless of the geography. You know, geography is no longer a barrier. COVID-19 has proven us that as well. And finally, it's the infrastructure needed for innovation, because innovation needs a strong infrastructure, whether it's the physical infrastructure, whether it's the data infrastructure, whether it's the regulatory infrastructure, or whether it's the funding infrastructure to take an idea to a proof of concept to the market, and so on. When we talk about digital health at ARC, we're focusing on these 6 areas. We call them hubs, from big data and artificial intelligence to the others that some of them I've mentioned before. But of course, I want to focus here on telemedicine, which is one of our hubs at ARC. And this is the whole ARC ecosystem. You see here our international collaborators, mostly North America. We're starting to find partners in Europe, and we're doing that as well. Corporate strategic partners such as Microsoft and Boston Scientific, and Baxter and Allscripts and AstraZeneca and other companies, 70 startup companies, 70. They're not all listed here. This is just a list, a short list. And then, of course, the academia we work with very closely here in Israel. And when we talk about telemedicine at ARC, we're looking across the full spectrum, from acute care to chronic disease management to rehabilitation. We have a huge emphasis on hospital at home programs, both for medicine patients as well as psychiatric patients. I'll say a few words about that. We're doing a lot of work on chronic disease management through a program called MICA, which stands for Managed Integrated Continuous Care Applications. And MICA, at the end of the day, works for any type of disease you can think about. We're building a program that has the technology side, has the clinical protocols, and has the multidisciplinary team approach. Put all that together, and that's basically what MICA is, with a lot of accountability over the patients across the continuum of care, and a lot of work we're doing in rehabilitation, which was actually our first entrance into the telemedicine world. We started with telerehabilitation in 2012, already seeing more than 60,000 patients through our telerehabilitation platform, and now doing in the past 3 years considerable work on telecardiac rehabilitation, which is a very, very successful program. So maybe at the heart of the transformation we're going to be seeing in the next decade is the transformation of hospitals. And traditional hospitals will become hybrid hospitals, which will have both physical beds as well as virtual beds. Imagine a 36-bed medicine ward that we have today in our hospitals. These 36-bed medicine wards are now transitioning at Sheba to become 18 beds physical and 18 beds virtual at home, at the patient's home. We call it a hospital at home program, and we're using the technology so that our doctors will stay at the hospital but care for the patients at home. Patients are hospitalized at home. Let me show you how we're doing this. We're also extending the whole hospital services to the hospital at home. So if we need a consult from a cardiologist, for example, the consult will be done through telemedicine, and the hospitalized patient is at home. If we need to, we transfer the patient back to the hospital if his condition deteriorates, and we can transfer him back to home if his condition is improving. We already have data on more than 2,000 patients we've done in this model. Some of the technology solutions we're using, we're looking for solutions to allow us to communicate with the patient, to monitor the patients, and to perform physical examinations. Because remember, the doctor is in the hospital, the patient is at home. How do we do the medical rounds? How do we examine the patient? We need to be able to perform physical examination from afar, and this is where Israeli technology is coming in to help us. We have numerous amount of innovation that we're looking at, and we pick and choose which is going to best serve our purposes. A couple of 4 companies that I'm showcasing here. TytoCare, of course, that allows us to examine patients from afar, was a major change before COVID, but especially through COVID, when doctors preferred to examine patients from afar, actually. To monitoring through a company called EarlySense, continuous monitoring, and to communication through an app, which we work with a company called Datos, which does all of our telemedicine platforms, and another company called Uniper that transforms any TV in the hospital into a communication station that allows us to do everything we need to do and communicate with the patient on all levels. And then, of course, came COVID. I call it sometimes ARC meets COVID-19, because it was really an explosion of innovation, a huge amount of innovation that came to be in a very short while. I won't have time, of course, to tell you all about it, but a few words relating to telemedicine, which was, again, only one of the topics we were focusing on. We started by treating patients in the hospital through telemedicine means. This was never conceived before. Why do we need to treat patients in the hospital through telemedicine? Well, if they're infected with a virus we know nothing about, back in March, we had our teams examine the patients, do the rounds on patients without touching them 100 meters away, but you can see here through the screens and through digital means. And then we started having those patients being hospitalized at home. So if you're not sick enough, if you're not a severe case of COVID, you can stay at home. We will monitor you, we will perform physical examination, we will manage, and we've built this comprehensive toolkit we call the Zero-Touch Telemedicine Toolkit, which we implemented at home. You see here Dr. Gadi Segal, the head of our first COVID department. He's taking care of patients at home in our teletent that we've built in the early months of COVID. We then, of course, have expanded this program, and we're seeing more patients in this way. And this is how the kits look like. The kit is being placed at the doorstep of the patient's home. The patient brings it in. The technology is inside the box. You deploy everything. There's a video that shows you how everything needs to be done, and thus starts the hospitalization at home. When we're discharging the patient after everything goes well, the patient puts back everything in the box and puts the box outside of his door, and somebody comes to pick it up for the next patient, of course. So this is just a snapshot, a brief snapshot of what ARC is and what we're doing around telemedicine. Of course, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Eyal, many thanks. Very impressive. And I'm 100% sure that this will encourage us to even go more for innovations and even more to exploit the room for maneuver with respect to telemedical applications. I was very interested in your zero-touch telemedicine toolkit. However, we cannot discuss, or we should not discuss it now, because I know that that Christophe Schubert is working in a similar direction. Maybe we can discuss it together at the end of our session. First of all, I would like to ask now, I'll bring in Dan with his incubator activities. Dan, you are not sitting in Tel Aviv, but in Haifa, as far as I understood. And your job is to encourage, moderate, enable, support startups, and even with a strong foot in the area of telemedicine. I'm very interested to learn.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Pleasure to be here. First of all, I must tell you that I had the pleasure of listening to many presentations of Professor Zimlichman, and you're probably the first one who pronounced his name correctly without breaking his teeth. So congratulations on that. The other thing that also related to what just presented here, just I think a few weeks ago, Sheba conducted a very interesting webinar. I think they called it Sheba 2030. Eyal, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but very informative, and it really showed the kind of their vision to maybe 10 years ahead. But I think that some of it was also kind of already implemented in Sheba these days. So very, very interesting, and highly recommended to watch this thing like 40, 50 minutes presentation. So let me also share some kind of few slides and talk about MindUp and a very unique to Israel model, which is the incubator. And MindUp was established as an incubator, a partnership of 4 entities, 2 large corporations that you're all familiar with, Medtronic and IBM. The third investor in MindUp is Pitango, which is one of, if not the largest venture capital firm in Israel. And the fourth partner in MindUp is Rambam, which is a large hospital in the northern part of Israel, here in Haifa. And what we're trying to do is a program that is basically facilitated or sponsored by the Israeli government, the Israel Innovation Authority. And the main essence of this program is that every company that we invest in it, we will provide it not only funding, but also the support and the nurturing, facilitation, mentorship, and all the basically support possible and needed for 2 years. So every company will come sit here in our office for 2 years. They will get from us all the administrative, logistic, legal support and services, as well as mentorship and involvement from my team and myself. We invest in early stage startups. We're looking for companies that will, and again, as mentioned here, basically are focusing on trying to make healthcare better, safer, cheaper, and more accessible. And in many ways, we're trying to look on what we like to call the 4 Ps, how we make medicine more preventative and more predictive and more proactive and more personalized. From here, I've been asked to give few examples of some of the companies that we have in our kitchen, if you call. And I wanted just to briefly touch upon that all in some ways support or will support some of the trends and the needs that were mentioned in previous presentations. So one of the companies is called Sonaris, and now I just realized that this video isn't working, but basically what this company is trying to do is to allow ultrasound without the need for experienced technician or expert. So basically the ultrasound itself is being controlled by a software that was trained to identify specific organ and acquire the information, acquire the image automatically, and transmit it to a cloud where the expert can analyze it. Obviously, later on, it can be also analyzed by the software. So this is something that will enable us to do ultrasound in different settings without the expert being next to the patient. Another company is a company called Resmetrics, and what you see here is something that was designed initially to deal with COPD and asthma patient, and obviously COVID added another application to this solution, but this is a small, something like a 10 centimeters patch that is able to measure and monitor continuously and very accurately the respiratory dynamic. And obviously this will be able to give early alert on deterioration of the condition of the patient. Another company that is also very interesting here is a company that is dealing with actually with sensors in the eye, where as you can see here, there are many applications that large and very known companies are working on solutions that are related to the eye. Different sensors, anywhere from measuring glucose through the eye, through smart lenses, etc. But one of the main problem of these solutions is that they don't have a source of energy. And as you can see, the solutions today are related to either external charger or batteries. And what this specific company, what it allows is actually to harvest energy from the movement of the eye. This kind of looks like a science fiction, but this is something that we actually able to harvest energy from the eye movement. And then I think from the signals that I got, probably this is time for me to to stop and not talk about other examples, Joseph, and unless you want me to.
Dan, thanks for your inside view on your incubator and on some selected project activities people do in your incubator. I have a very specific question to add, and that is, do you already have some kind of experience how innovators like you mentioned have already experiences with respect to collaboration with German actors and the German health system? Is it that a familiar activity for you, or are you still at the very beginning in this business?
So the companies that are coming to MindUp are fairly young and at early stage. We are looking for collaboration very often with healthcare systems. We do have Rambam here kind of in-house, and we do some collaborations with other hospitals, with some of the companies, including Sheba. And in some cases, we are able to go and do some collaborations outside of Israel. Typically in Israel, I would say the default is to go to the US, and we do have some specific collaborations between specific company to a specific US hospital. So far, we had some interactions with German hospitals or with German clinicians, but nothing was came to fruition to a real collaboration so far. But all of us are always open and happy to talk to any either company. We had some interactions with BI and some other Brown and some other German companies, but again, nothing came to fruition so far. Always happy to talk to people.
So that is maybe that we are at a point where we can start a new activity. We have Jörg Debatin from Berlin and his Health Innovation App. We have a region with big ambitions with respect to innovations in the health business, and we have your partnership. Maybe we can start something like a new institution to moderate and accelerate this mutual collaboration. But we'll see. That's not the time to think about it, but maybe it's a starting point today. Thanks again, and now I am addressing Christophe Schubert, our sleep expert from, or our vital sleep expert from Essen, and telemedicine specialist. And I am very interested to learn whether or not activities like this can be of use for his activities, innovation activities in Essen, and for the clinical day-to-day operations. And furthermore, maybe a link to what Eyal says with respect to zero-touch telemedicine in the context of COVID-19. Christophe.
Thank you. I would like to highlight also the perspectives from our medical views. And so I would like to share some slides. Hopefully you will see them. And as we addressed it many times, so coronavirus, yes, it is a digital meteorite strike, which is enabling the digitalization of medicine, although being very small. And the problem is when talking about telemedicine, it's a real, it's an abstract issue as you see it here. These are all telemedical issues. You see the video consultation, you see the non-invasive ventilation devices transmitting data every day. And you also see the devices you can give a patient at home, as we did in our clinical study on telemonitoring in heart failure patients. The problem is that there are no real guidelines on telemedicine for medical doctors to be followed. There are only many position papers offering the perspectives of digital medicine. And so, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, there are insecurities on the side of medical doctors, as there is a lack of process-oriented, replicable approaches and implementation guidelines to be implemented in the clinic. And this is also the problem with new sensors. So we also have collaborations with startups to develop new sensors. You heard about the contactless techniques to measure vital parameters in patients with COVID symptoms. We always use apps in different settings. And the problem is that especially those apps have to be validated to show whether the sensor or the app is able to measure what it promised to measure. And that's why we have to have this validation according to the medical device regulation. And that's why the collaboration, the strong collaboration in performing those clinical studies is very, very crucial. Next problem is that digital medicine doesn't only consist of isolated solutions, as you heard before. So it has to be considered more integrative in the future. And therefore also the E&M health data from sensors, from apps have to be merged with clinical data in order to bring the greatest benefits to our patients. Our patients should remain in the focus of our daily activities. And that's why we have to discuss the learnings. Jörg Debatin said it before, the glass is half full and not half empty. And so let us discuss from the learnings, having got so far from clinical studies, but also from our clinical experience. We have to look at the right sensors. We have to choose the right devices. We have to discuss about the right and safe transmission, whether they are or synchronous. We have to have a sufficient adherence and digital competence, not only by our patients, but also by the medical doctors. We have to choose the right patients in the right settings, and we have to be the right and standardized interventions. So in summary, we have to focus the right actors in the right intersectoral network with a fair reimbursement. And these are the learnings to be discussed, and I'm looking forward to discuss this with you and also the other panelists. So regarding, as you mentioned before, we have performed clinical studies when I was in Berlin at the Charité in patients with heart failure. So we had telemedical tools to get their data on a daily basis, EKG data, weight data, blood pressure data, and we had real standardized interventions, descriptions, what to do if there was a parameter changing. So how to optimize this therapy of this patient. And we could show in a randomized controlled trial that the patients, having been randomized to the telemedical group, that they had a better outcome than those in the control group. And that's why we were very happy that the Federal Joint Committee has decided to put this into the regular reimbursement so that telemedical tools in heart failure patients can be reimbursed by the health insurance companies. So this is the first step, I think, but I would like to discuss this now with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Christophe, for your impressions from Essen. Yes, you mentioned your guideline, and it ended up with fair reimbursement. And you mentioned that maybe this decision of the Joint Committee on Heart Failure in cardiology could be a milestone, maybe a breakthrough. This is a reasoning and a question I would want to give to Jörg Debatin. We waited for this decision for decades, but now it took place. And will it be a breakthrough or only just a small flower in the spring?
No, I think, Joseph, you have to see this in the context of what I alluded to before, that there are apps that can be prescribed that are part of the normal remunerative process, so they're fully financed, fully paid for by the normal healthcare system, our statutory healthcare system. And I do see the breakthrough of what Professor Köhler from the Charité did with regard to cardiac insufficiency, bringing together that program and collecting the evidence. And that, of course, was a major feat. And now it is in front of the committee that will decide on the pricing. I do think that it's a breakthrough in so far as it illustrates what is possible, what has become possible. Is it still taking too long? Yes. Would I want more real-world evidence to be admitted and move beyond RCTs? Yes. But see it as a continuum, and the progress that we've made over the last, 2.5 years, last 30 months is more than we certainly did over the last 20 years. I'm confident that Ginny is out of the bottle. This won't be just an isolated fluke. You won't get this back into the bottle, but it does not mean that we are quite where we want to be. But here too, this is why I focused on the fast track. I mean, who would have thought that in Germany, we actually start with a product where we say, hey, we haven't figured it out completely. We actually go with the flow, or we collect data as we go as a trial period. That's new to our culture. That's new to the way that we innovate healthcare. And I personally am, I'm as I said, the glass is half full in my view. And we can build on that progress, but again, it's not that we are really sort of at a stage where we see an Israeli sort of ecosystem that is much more daring, much more courageous, much more innovative because of that. But we're slowly catching up, and our strength is the size. The 6Ks that were mentioned started with smallness. We are big, and through that size, we're attractive and as a market. And I considered it my job to get the smartest people from all over the world to look at Germany and really consider us as an attractive market to try out your innovations. And no, I don't think this is going to be sort of just an isolated happening. I really see this in the context of something that is bigger and that is here to stay.
Thanks for encouraging us, Jörg. Unfortunately, we have some time pressure, but we should not end this panel without asking some of the Israeli contributors, or one of the Israeli contributors, to, let me say, evaluate whether or not there are promising collaboration prospects for Germany and Israel in this telemedicine area. I would address Eyal to respond to this question.
Sure, happy to respond, and of course, I'm very much hoping that it would be the case. I can tell you that our ARC ecosystem, as I've mentioned before, has the leading hospitals from mostly North America. Mayo Clinic, Mount Sinai, Cedars-Sinai, Mass General, Thomas Jefferson, McGill in Montreal, Sunnybrook in Toronto. We work with all of them very, very closely. My connections are very deep in the US. Because of my previous work there. So it was natural for me, but we want to find the right partners in Germany as well. We already have a few hospitals in Europe. One of them is the Zurich University Hospital and the hospital in Denmark. And we're looking at a few hospitals in London. But definitely, we want to expand and have more collaborations with Germany. And I think with the changes that are happening now, it's high time for digital health, to come in and do some transformation. We've had some discussions with some German players, but they never really accumulated to concrete actions. So I'll be very, very happy to take it to the next step. I think you can share my email with anybody on this call, and I'll be very, very receptive to receiving any ideas to sit down, unfortunately without sharing coffee together, but at least virtually, and start thinking about joining forces. And once we have flights back, I'll be happy to take this to the next level and think how we can, again, take healthcare to the next level it needs to be.
Thanks, Eyal. I have to come to an end. I will do it with 3 brief messages I learned from our panel today. The first is to the Medicon people, Leif Grundmann, for example. You have something to write on your to-do list, on your agenda. Leif Grundmann, Daniela, and Dimitri, we have something to do to further develop collaboration. Second message is with respect to Germany. Genie is out of the box. We are living in times of change, and we will try to catch up, and maybe Israel collaboration to Israel is of use for us. And third, it's the quotation of Eyal. It's not us against them, it's collaboration, what matters for the future. And I hope the breakthrough sessions in advance will help to collaborate, to develop a collaboration. In so far, enjoy the breakout sessions. Bye-bye, and see you soon again.